let's say you've set up some private VLANs. And when you're done setting up those private VLANs, you realize a particular server is communicating with another server that it should not be communicating with. So in this case, let's say we have file server 1, and it's not supposed to be communicating with DNS2 or even DNS1, but it is. What do? You verify the problem. Let's check that out. We go over to file server 1 and we ping the IP address of DNS1 and DNS2. So we got 10.1.200.50, and that is successful. And then we're going to ping DNS2, and that is successful as well. But file server 1 is not supposed to be able to ping DNS1 and DNS2. We're using private VLANs. So what should you be thinking of first? You should be thinking of this. They're in the same community VLAN. Why? Because in order for devices to communicate with each other when using private VLANs, they must be in the same community VLAN. If devices are in different community VLANs, then they can't communicate with each other. If a device is in an isolated VLAN, it can't communicate with anybody. So right away, you have already narrowed down the issue. And you feel really confident that that is the issue. But let's still confirm before we jump to conclusions here. So what are the commands that we can utilize? Well, we can use the show VLAN private VLAN command to verify the primary VLANs, secondary VLANs, and the mappings. So let's go ahead and do that. Go to DSW1, or DSW2, pardon me. Type in show VLAN private VLAN, and we'll see here that the primary VLAN is VLAN 200. We have two secondary VLANs, 501 and 502. One of them is isolated and one of them is community. And now let's see who's inside or who's connected to these isolated and community VLANs. We have file server 2. We have DNS1 in the community VLAN, DNS2 in the community VLAN, and file server 1 in the community VLAN. So we just confirmed that file server 1 is in the community VLAN when it shouldn't be. It should be in the isolated VLAN. That's where it should be according to documentation. So let's just look at the output of show interface, gigabit Ethernet 1/0/23, and we'll tack on the switch port keyword. And we'll see down at the bottom here that the administrative mode, or the administrative private VLAN host association command that was used, was mapping 200 to 502. And operationally right now, we are VLAN 200 primary and 502 secondary. So we've confirmed that the host association is incorrect. Looking at the output of show run interface gigabit Ethernet 1/0/23, we'll also confirm that for us. There's the command. It should have been 501 instead of 502. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this. Configure terminal. And we'll paste that in. We'll say new. And then we should have a port flapping here. We'll let that happen. And then we'll grab this, copy and paste that in, and say 501. Let's verify that the change has taken effect. Show VLAN, private VLAN, and it has. Gigabit Ethernet 1/0/23 is now back in the isolated VLAN where it belongs. So it was just a configuration issue with the host association command, and we fixed that by using the switch port private VLAN host association 200 501 command. But let's go back now and just verify that the problem is truly solved, and we will try to ping DNS1, and that ping fails. And we are happy that it's failing. And then we ping DNS2, and that ping fails. We are happy that it's failing. Let's just double check to make sure that we can't access file server 2 either. Because file server 2 is in the isolated VLAN with us, and we can't do that either. So this is great. Now everything's working as we intend it to. However, let's not forget, we still need to be able to access resources outside of our primary VLAN of VLAN 200. Because users in VLAN 10 or VLAN 20, or even users at the internet or communication that has to happen outside of the subnet is going to have to occur. And there's a promiscuous port that does that for us. So let's just ping here 192.0.2.1 and see if it's successful. So it is from file server 1. Is it from file server 2, 192.0.2.1? It is from file server 2 as well. And then let's just double check on DNS2. It is not there. All right, because I typed it in wrong, .2.1, and that is successful. And then lastly, ping 192.0.2.1 is successful as well. So there is connectivity outside of these private VLANs. And who is doing that for us? It's the promiscuous port. But in this case, who is the promiscuous port? If you look at the output of show VLAN, private VLAN, you'll see the primary VLAN, the secondary VLAN, the type of secondary VLAN that it is, and you'll also see the ports. Usually you'll see the promiscuous port listed here, but the promiscuous port is only listed here if it is a layer 2 switch port. If it's not a layer 2 switch port, then it's a layer 3 routed port. And that layer 3 routed port is acting as the promiscuous port. But what about an SVI? Well, that's what we're using here, an SVI. Interface VLAN 200, but it doesn't show up here. So if we want to verify our promiscuous port, show run interface VLAN 200, we'll see this private VLAN mapping command. This private VLAN mapping command is indicating that we are the promiscuous port for the secondary VLANs of 501 and 502, which are part of the primary VLAN of VLAN 200. So that's what we're using here. If we look at the output of show IP interface VLAN 200, is there anything listed there about it being a promiscuous port? Let's see here. Internet address, no broadcast address, MTU helper address, direct multicast, outgoing, inbound proxy, security. No, I don't see anything. I don't see anything at all here about it being a promiscuous port. What about show interfaces VLAN 200? Maybe it's in this output here. We can see our hardware, our MAC address that's going to be used for the default gateway IP address when people ARP for it. So that's where frames are going to be sent to as they need to leave this particular subnet. But again, there's really nothing talking about interface VLAN 200 as being the promiscuous port. So it's just easiest to realize all these devices are in VLAN 200. So what type of SVI is going to be used for VLAN 200? It's interface VLAN 200. And we can verify the configuration of that with show run interface VLAN 200. And there's our private VLAN mapping for that. But let's say we did have a layer 2 port as a promiscuous port. So I'm just going to randomly grab a port here on DSW2. Let's just grab gigabit 1/0/8. That's all we're going to do. It's not operational right now, but if we look at interface gigabit Ethernet 1/0/8, and let's just configure it for switch port, private VLAN, switch port, private VLAN, there we go, mapping. And the mapping we're going to set up is 501 and 502. And then we're going to say switch port mode, private VLAN, promiscuous. So we set it up as a promiscuous port. If you use the command show interfaces gigabit Ethernet 1/0/8 switch port, this command here lets you verify your administrative private VLAN mappings. So this is telling you when you're a promiscuous port, you are the promiscuous ports for these two private VLANs, VLAN 501 and VLAN 502. And remember, we can verify what type of private VLANs they are by using the show VLAN private VLAN command, and they're listed right there.